Okay, good morning, everyone. Tim Tearaway here of the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. Speaking on behalf of our State of Vermont's Enterprise GIS Consortium, we're happy to host with us today Krithica Kantharaj, who is a Senior Solutions Engineer with ESRI and a member of the Hub product team here, who is going to help clarify some of the directions and updates that ESRI has been working on for the Hub platform. For those of you who are unaware, the Hub platform is one of the ESRI products that is supporting the current version of the Vermont Open Geodata portal, which is essentially our data clearinghouse for all interested parties to get Vermont GIS data in the open domain. And we are using this talk as a preface, basically, as we begin to scope out what the future of the Vermont Open Geodata portal looks like. It's been a few years now since the portal itself has been modified in detail or in principle, and it's about time that we put some serious thought and effort towards what the future of the portal itself looks like. So we wanted to talk with Krithica and hear from her and her team about what some best practices are along the lines of serving information in the public domain. So with that, Krithica, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. We are recording the sessions for future use, so if folks want to return to it, you'll be able to do so. I'll send that link out afterwards. Krithica, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Krithica Kantharaj, and I'm a solution engineer with ESRI. I work out of the Boston office, and I support all of New England state governments. But today, what I'm here to do is to provide you a presentation of the Hub best practices. We'll start all the way from, site creation, content management, and go through a whole bunch of other things. I'm not feeling my best today, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn off my camera. I apologize for that. Got some illness from my kids. But I'm hoping that my voice doesn't give up at the end of this presentation. All right, so going into today's agenda, we'll be getting into some details on best practices on everything from site creation to managing your content effectively to administering your hub. So we have a lot of content that I'll be sharing with you today. And just to start off, I'm going to give you a quick of Hub and then go into the best practices. Our vision on Hub is that we believe communities are better when they work together. And so we've created Hub, which is a cloud-based engagement platform that helps you work more effectively with your communities. And when we say community, we mean anyone outside of your organization. That means your residents in your community. It could be leaders in your community, government leaders, leaders in business, local universities, nonprofits, pretty much anyone outside of your organization that can help achieve your goals that you can leverage Hub for. So we break up Hub into 4 distinct areas. We have the sites capability, which is what you can use to spin up beautiful looking websites to inform and to educate. You can share open data, maps, and applications through the open data part of the product. And these 2 components are the Hub Basic, which comes with your subscription for ArcGIS Online. And the open data part is what Vermont is actively been using for a number of years. And there is also a premium part of the product that brings in the concept of community. So it brings in tools to engage and to collaborate, to work together on teams towards the goals that you're working on and to rally around initiatives. And we've got these 2 different flavors of the product, which is basic and premium. So we get into the best practices and we'll start with site creation and branding. So the first thing before you plan your Hub site, Hub has a really fun drag and drop layout editor that you can use to create those beautiful websites and easily plan your website and the way it looks. And while it's tempting to get in there and start tinkering around, we really recommend that, you first plan. First answer some of the key questions, like who is your intended audience? Is it the public? Is it a specific audience that you have in mind? would you want to be regularly using this hub for? I know in your case it's open data, but really thinking about, your audience and how they're going to be using this can be really valuable. And asking questions such as who are going to be those users who bookmark your hub site to go back time and time again for new information and updates, and who wants to be involved in contributing to that data, and what are the goals. So what is the purpose of the hub? What are you trying to achieve? And what resources do you have available for the ongoing maintenance and management of that hub? And that takes us to the next, slide as to understanding how much of time you need to invest. It really depends on those goals that, was laid out in the previous page. So once you have your goal in mind, then you can start thinking about the amount of time that you need to invest within each of your initiatives that you have planned out. That can be anything from, private data sharing within the
meeting.
organization or just within your department. And
So where was he trying to export from?
I think someone muted Krithica by mistake.
That does look to be the case. Krithica.
Yep, I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Not sure when I got muted, so I can go over the slide again.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So once you have that goal in mind, as laid out in that previous page, and that can be anything, from private data sharing just within your organization, or it could be within your department, or it could be all the way to that deep two-way engagement and collaboration with those community members. And as engagement increases on the y-axis, of course, time investment increases as well. So again, having a clear idea of your goal is critical to help keep in mind and inform the level of maintenance and governance that you will need for your hub. And before you get into the app, we recommend actually sketching it out, drawing out your ideas on paper, before getting into the application itself, and really, putting that pen to paper like we've done here to create that site. And it's easier to do it first, do this first, and then build your site, so that you have an idea of what your site is really going to look like. And if you want an easier way to get started, you can start, with one of the 40 templates that we have available in Hub. And these come with beautiful site template that's already been branded. And a lot of great content is in there already. And many of these Hub sites and templates come with ArcGIS solutions built in them. So you already have pre-made maps and applications to begin with, and you can start hooking them up. One of the first things we recommend that you do is, regardless of which direction you start with, is using themes. Start by setting a theme. ArcGIS Hub does inherit the shared organization theme that is set in ArcGIS Online. If your organization has done that, you can overwrite that with the Hub theme options that you see off to the right-hand side here. But you can use this to create your own color schemes and to customize these fonts and the heading fonts. And you can also use that as a mechanism to help you match the theme of your other web properties. So you can really have that seamless experience between those different web properties. But setting the theme first before you start building and before you start customizing any of the colors will really take you a long way. It's a lot easier to do and set the theme before to get that cohesive look and feel of your site while you're building that out. But one of the site level configurations you can set is how content is displayed. And that is done by how, you see in the left panel here. So the content side panel on the screenshot of the map, the panel off to the left-hand side, the side panel provides information about the item, the summary, the item type, important dates, but you can control whether it's opened or closed by default based on the item content family. So sometimes people choose the content panel to be closed when they're opening up web applications, and the content panel to be open when they're looking at raw data. So really, you can customize the look and feel of, when people choose the type of data that they're looking at or the content that they're looking at, how the look and feel that you want for your end user. Now that you put a lot of, thought and time into creating that hub site, the next thing is to bring all the content into it. And you want the users to stay there. So you want them to stay within your hub site, keep exploring and discovering new things. So when you have those embedded apps and embedded link settings enabled, users will actually see those applications and those registered items as documents and links directly within your hub site without them being taken out of the application. So they can, just stay in there and browse and find the content that they need without leaving your hub site. And analytics, we think, are a very important part of Hub as well. We do highly recommend that you have the Hub activity tracking enabled. This collects anonymized usage data for your Hub site, and it populates the engagement dashboard that you can see there. We made a change to the switch that was powering this engagement dashboard from Google Analytics to our own ESRI managed telemetry service. So as you know, Google Analytics, they deprecated the Universal Analytics and they moved over to Google Analytics 4. But Google Analytics also had a number of security issues, sampling issues. So over the past 18 months, ESRI has built its own telemetry service, and that is now powering the engagement dashboard. You can still use a number of third-party analytics, such as you can bring your own Google Analytics 4 account, Adobe Analytics, or Site Improve, and connect those here and have those working in conjunction with the Hub activity tracking. Another best practice is anytime you're collecting that usage data, even if it's anonymized, a good idea is to let your site users know that you're doing so. So we provide this consent notice option, and it's fully customizable, but that gives end users the ability to accept that tracking or to reject if they choose to do so. One thing that we recently added to this is this new button, blue button that you see over there is the ability to subscribe to receive weekly updates on your site engagement. So you can get those key insights and several more insights directly to your inbox. We've added, other important metrics like the top refers, the top download items for any premium users. And you can now have this option to subscribe to receive these weekly emails, telemetry reports to your inbox. Now, this is just the first instance of engagement insights that you'll be able to subscribe to, and we plan to add more of these sort of insights that you can subscribe to in the future. The next section is on managing domains. A huge benefit of hub sites is that they allow you to configure a custom domain, and we do recommend this to maintain consistency across your web properties, and I know Vermont is doing that. By default, Hub comes with a default URL, and it's either hub.arcgis, hub.org, hub.arcgis.com or opendata.arcgis.com, and your org short name is prepended to that URL. But if you choose to go the custom domain route, which is what a lot of customers do, a few things to keep in mind is that you have that CNAME set to the hub.arcgis.com, and Hub issues that security certificate, but then it can take up to 24 hours for that to take effect. So sometimes when people set it up and it doesn't happen immediately, don't worry, it can take a full day and it will happen in about 24 hours. But a very important point to note is that custom domains exist alongside that site default URL that comes out of the box with Hub, and it does not replace it. So even if something happens to your custom domain, you will always have that default URL as a backup to be able to go in and still access your site. So we recommend that you write down that default URL somewhere and don't lose it, because that would be your backup policy for this. So the next is meta tags. And we recently added this option to add meta tags within the settings panel within that layout editor. Meta tags provide information to help control how your site will appear in search engines. So if you have two sites with pretty similar content, your search engine optimizer or CEO can, take a hit. So a search engine like Google will see that your ranking will take a hit there, and you can choose this. You can use this little code snippet in that blue box and add that into your metadata section on any duplicate site, or you can have it in your clone sites, not just in your production site, so that, when you're making clones for testing purposes, your primary site does not take a hit and will show up on top of the search list once you add this meta tag to your duplicate sites. Let's go into layout editing now. Some best practices here. And the first one being the most important, we recommend that you use your row card liberally. So the row card is really what is the building block of your hub site. The different building blocks that make up all the different parts of your hub site as you're building that layout. Every layout card is nested inside of a row card. And those row cards can have background images, they can have different colors. And so they're a really nice way to visually distinguish the different types of content on your hub site. So it's easier for them to understand as they're scrolling through. And it's more visually appealing to have the content broken down, as it reduces the risk for accidental deletion of content. So imagine, if you have one row card, and we say this by personal experience, if you have one row card and you pull in a bunch of cards, if you delete that card, all of your cards within that, go away. Whereas if you have row by row by row, it's a lot easier to recreate anything that may be accidentally deleted. Another nice thing about row cards is that you can limit visibility to specific groups. You can have a version of your hub site that is exclusively for those people who are in that group. And once they sign in, they can see the rows that are hidden to the general public. So it's a really nice functionality that you can customize for certain types of people. And you really don't need to have Hub Premium for this capability. Next thing is mobile responsiveness. Over the past year, we have been tracking the use of people using hub sites in a mobile device. And we found that about 35% of hub site visitors were on mobile phones or tablets. So mobile responsiveness, we think, are a critical factor. And keeping that in mind, it is good to have a mobile design for your site when you're building your layout. And we have provided this option out of the box, and everything we put into the product is purely mobile responsive. But a few additional things that we like to point out is that to provide that really great mobile experience to your end users, several of the layout cards, like the card that you see here in the middle, have an option to either hide the layout card or to configure a completely separate mobile experience for that layout card. And again, the spacer card as well, off to the right, has an option to be hidden on mobile devices. Spacers are what you use to add some additional space around text and content on your hub site. They look great when you're looking at the site on a desktop, but when you're on a mobile device, it can be a lot to scroll through. So you can hide those when you are using it in a mobile device, and we recommend doing that so that, people are not scrolling through to prevent, additional scrolling on a mobile device. And one additional thing we've added is device preview. There is a button on top that if you go into the draft preview, you can see your site on different device sizes, like a tablet, a mobile phone. And you can even see the landscape version of the phone. And you can scroll through these different size devices and preview what your site is going to look like. And this is just another tool to make sure that your site looks great on all different screen sizes. A few remaining general layout tips over here. We've heard stories about people who are working in multiple browsers or multiple tabs, and they accidentally overwrote some of what they had created. So our recommendation is to work on a single tab when you are in that edit mode. It's also a good idea to communicate with your teammates or any of your collaborators when you're editing a site to let them know that you are going to make changes to that site, because the way Hub is architected now, it is possible to overwrite someone else's work. We are working on that fact on this part of the product. So we are working on a concept of layout versioning that is going to help alleviate some of the issues that come as a result of the ability to concurrently edit. The second tip is to use out-of-the-box tools as much as possible before resorting to custom solutions. And you can always preview untested changes on a clone of the site or a page before you publish it. But again, if you make that clone, make sure you're adding those meta tags that I mentioned before. And Hub releases updates to the product almost every week. So if something suddenly looks off, we have a change log that includes all the different changes that we made to the product with the most recent release. So you can always look that up to see if any of the applicable updates mentioned there are causing things to look different. So the last concept here is we've introduced something called projects. Projects is a part of Hub Premium. We recommend to use projects when you have to showcase a specific time-bound, goal-oriented, or team-oriented activity. And unlike pages, which you have a fully flexible and customizable layout, the projects are very focused, and it has a specific layout. It's easy to update. They're form-based and they're templated, so they're fast to create, and they're also location-based. They also have some additional features that are built in them. So in the future, if you decide to go for premium, you can make use of projects to keep track of the projects that are going on within your departments. So next, we're going to, go into best practices of managing users and some privileges. So just as a very high level overview here, talking about Arcgis Online organizations. When you have Arcgis Online organization, Hub is a part of it. It's an essential app that you get alongside all the other apps that you see. So if you have access to Dashboard, Map Viewer, Experience Builder, Story Maps, and more, you also have access to Hub. If you only have Hub Basic, which I believe right now that is the case for Vermont, you have a single organization to work with your coworkers and contractors. But if you purchase Hub Premium, you get a second organization for your community. And however you define your community, whether those are partner organizations who don't have Arcgis Online licenses themselves or members of the general public, you get to decide. And this creates that permeable barrier between you and your community, and content and users that are private within your employee organization will remain that way. But you'll be able to share content and collaborate with your community users very easily. And even better, you will be able to administer and manage your community with your own pool of user licenses and credits, so that you're not pulling from your original Arcgis Online organization. There are a few key user roles that are useful with Hub, which you will also see in our documentation. Hub administrators, or any user with a default administrator role in your employee organization. There are some actions like enabling collaborative events and creating core items. You'll see in Hub user interface asking for an administrator to do on behalf of others, and that's what we're talking about here. Similarly, the community administrator is any user with the default administrator role in the community organization. In Hub Premium, members of the employee organization can also have a community administrator privilege. They can have a community administrator account in the community, or if they're not administrators, in the employee organization, so that they can manage and auto add community members to the core team, and supporting teams below come below the admins or the site managers. There is a custom role that we suggest that is based on the default publisher role, plus a couple of additional privileges that we'll just discuss in the next slide. But any user who's creating and managing sites or initiatives themselves should have this role. And all other core team members should have the default publisher privileges, as mentioned here. That site manager that I mentioned previously, that is a custom role that we recommend that's based on the default publisher role. In addition, this user needs to have administrative privileges to create groups and update capabilities. And that's what will allow them to actually create core teams by themselves without needing to call in an admin. And also assign members, which allows them to bring in colleagues to the core team automatically without needing to wait for an invitation to be accepted. And that's really speeds up the collaboration process quite a bit. So this is the only sort of custom role that we recommend. And that being said, we generally suggest, other than that one role, sticking to default roles when using Hub, especially when using the publisher role as the baseline. And we suggest this for two reasons. One is that when new privileges are introduced within ArcGIS Online, default roles are more likely to have those privileges applied appropriately. If you're using a custom role, there's a very good chance that the privilege will be added and turned off by default, and you'll have to go back in and update that for all of your custom roles. It's a lot easier if you don't have to worry about that by using default roles. The second reason we suggest that is that for you to have a good experience within Hub, while we're designing and building Hub, we account for individual privileges, but any new functionality that is really tied to a default role and the associated permissions, if you scale back permissions for your users, we can't guarantee that you won't get emailed 5 times a week by someone in your core team asking why they can't do things. So just focusing on providing default role is good. So if you choose to set users, particularly community users, at a level below the publisher level, we would say that proceed carefully, because the default data editor and viewer roles we've seen actually don't have the ability to join groups in other organizations. I know that this is something that you might want to consider when you get Hub Premium, but wanted to mention this, because you are thinking in the future about possibilities of using. So let's talk about groups a little bit. There are a few fundamental groups that you will see in ArcGIS Online when you create Hub, if you are using Hub. You get these default groups that get spun up. And the first is the content group of the site. This group is used to power the content catalog of any site. Any item that's shared to that group will appear in the site's catalog. You may also see core groups for that site that you're working on, and these groups are general administrator group of that site. Anyone in this group can edit the site and its pages, and they'll also have the ability to manage content in the content catalog and manage and message followers. So one thing that I'll highlight is that you should not add users to these groups via ArcGIS Online. This is really important. Please don't do that. Please do it using Hub. It will make sure that the users are added to the core team and receive all the necessary access permissions that they need to do in that site. You'll also see followers groups, and they are tied to the followers button, the follow button that appears on the site. So this is also a part of Hub Premium. When you get Hub Premium, community users can follow your Hub site. So when a user follows an initiative, they're basically telling you that they are interested in staying up to date and learning more when an update happens to the site. And core team members can directly send an email message to the followers with updates on what's happening in that initiative. One other type of group that I think it's worth talking about alongside core teams, and this is specific to Premium. The core team provides full administrative access over the site, its pages, content, catalog, followers, and that's a lot of power. And over the years, we've heard from users that it is useful to give a set of privileges to community members to access and manage and work on a small section of the site without granting access to the whole site. And if you have ArcGIS Hub Premium, the core team members can create supporting teams with either view or edit privileges. And these groups allow for more narrow view or edit access over content relevant to the site. For instance, supporting teams can be granted access to pages of their own that they can edit and manage without needing it to be the whole administrative privileges for the entire site. And supporting teams can be accessed by team members via the team profile. This team profile is an out-of-the-box landing spot for team members. The profile can highlight the scope of the team's work and make it easier for team members to find the content that their teammates are working on. These profiles can be made private, so only members of the team can get to them, or they can also be made public if you want to have a lot of transparency to the public on who's working on this, provide a human face to your work, then that's an option. Team profiles can be easily linked to from a site or a page using the team card, which you'll find in the layout. And this card respects the visibility of the team profile, meaning that it will dynamically show or hide only to those team members that the site visitor has access to. Finally, team profiles are a really great way for collaborators who are not very familiar with GIS to contribute their own content from their team profile. Team members can share content either by selecting an app or a map in another item that is in ArcGIS Online already, or by uploading a file from their device. And this upload experience is a little bit more user-friendly than the one in ArcGIS Online, and it's a great way if you want, information from your community members, and if you want to share announcements or post whatever, certain community members have been working on. Another exciting premium feature that we've released in the past year is team discussions. Users can begin a discussion on any type of item in ArcGIS Hubs, whether that's a data set, a web map, or a dashboard, or even a document. And managers can decide whether they want their team to be able to participate in discussions, and they can restrict that as well. And the same goes for items and site owner items as well. And site managers can set whether or not they want to allow or restrict discussions. Now, these are private team-based discussions, and these conversations, if you start to create a post, only your teammates can view them, and they will be able to respond as well. And discussions in Hub supports familiar features like post and reply, reactions, and if you do an mention when you mention somebody, it sends an email notification to that user with a link to that post that goes directly to that specific post so that they can reply, and it calls your attention to that specific post. And discussions are geographically aware, so the authors who post, they can either tag a point, a line, or a polygon, and you don't have to just pick any one of the shape. You can mix and match when discussing spatial data maps. And finally, we are releasing more and more tools to keep these conversations constructive and on topic. So an upcoming feature is going to be moderation, which includes things such as hiding abusive posts automatically. Going into best practices for content management. A lot of effective content management is heavily dependent on your workflows, your goals, and everything that you've already had in place today. So I want to highlight some goals to consider, how you actually want to communicate and publish your plan. Now, a lot of this is constructed as though you're creating a new site for the first time. And I know that, Vermont has your existing site, you're thinking um, to recreate it or rebrand it or restructure it. And I would suggest, even with sites that you have created, take a step back and consider what are the most important things for your workflow, your site, and then consider how you might make changes to that workflow. For starters, we always suggest reviewing ArcGIS Online and the Hub help pages for best practices, but we really do have a lot of, frequently asked FAQs and answers and a whole content section that has been updated, including changes to how, search works and how download configurations work. So identify exactly what your management priorities are and internally document and socialize that workflow. For example, are you focused on low maintenance? One of the biggest things we recommend is limit and manage just a few groups and content within ArcGIS Online. If it's possible, don't have tons and tons of groups. Limit the number of groups that you have, and you'll only have a few people who have access to managing that content. 1 or 2 points of contact is usually much better than trying to coordinate with too many people. And if you're looking at fast updates, we recommend creating items that only have, one layer under them. And then if you have an advanced enough, and if you have advanced scripting capabilities, then you can update your workflows to include publishing directly from Pro in an automated fashion. And we know that, some data is also coming from ArcGIS server, and there are different ways that you can automate this process as well. But at a minimum, certain configurations like limiting 1 layer per item, that way, whenever there's a change to that layer, it doesn't impact the metadata on the rest of the service for a bunch of other layers like update dates, editor specific things, and such. And what if your goal is ease of updates? Once again, if you are metadata savvy, we recommend working with the out-of-the-box ArcGIS Online metadata profiles. There actually is a new metadata editor that you may have noticed that we're trying to unify across all of the products, ArcGIS Pro, Enterprise, and across the board. It's a great new user interface, and all of that's in ArcGIS Online as well. So again, related to faster updates, try to limit the multi-layer services. We just find that a lot of times users have dozens, maybe even, like hundreds of layers. And it becomes really hard to manage any sort of changes or migrations if you need to update that data rapidly or even migrate those layers to a different environment. Content management choices. Again, as I said earlier, a lot of this really really depends on your existing workflows. Well, I've given some suggestions of what tends to work the best. It really depends on your current infrastructure and what bounds you have to make some changes, right? I like to use this section as like, a Q&A and, sort of ask, where should I manage content? And it really depends, right? Should it be in ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Enterprise or in Hub itself? It really depends on the purpose, I would say. Manage the content as close to it as you can. Any power users that have worked with a lot of data tend to manage those metadata layers in ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Enterprise. But if you have a lot of collaborators, especially those who are not ArcGIS savvy, we would say, work on the metadata in ArcGIS Hub itself. We have the content library there for a reason, and it's out of the box, and you can add and remove content very easily, make small metadata updates, and things like that. So following on is how I should actually manage metadata. Again, I would say that it really depends on the requirements and really the richness of your metadata. We typically find that, most people who are experienced with ArcGIS Pro have a full publication pipeline. If you do want to do advanced metadata editing, keep most of that within Pro and earlier parts in your publishing pipeline. And then ultimately, they end up in ArcGIS Online as a last stop. We do support out-of-the-box content details editing in ArcGIS Hub as well. And a very easy on the fly if you want to make changes while you're on a mobile device, changes to the title, tags, categories, summary descriptions, things like that. ArcGIS Hub is a great place to do it. But anything that requires a large amount of formal metadata editing at this time, we recommend doing that earlier on in the pipeline, be in ArcGIS Pro, and then ArcGIS Online would be that last stop. Then the big question that comes up a lot is, management of services, right? Again, depends on what bandwidth you have to migrate services, what your schedule looks like within your organization. But generally, we have found that transitioning to cloud managed services provides a lot of enhancements faster out of the box. And that comes particularly handy if you have a lot of content and you want to showcase a lot of open data for downloading, filtering, things like that. But at a very high level, easier creation and management is actually what we are looking at, so that when you put your data in ArcGIS Online, the features get updated quicker and you have access to the latest and greatest. And on to search and discovery part. This is a part of the application that has been around since the beginning of Hub. And the best practice, as we say here, are consider what your goal is and how you want to present the content in your catalog. End users are happier when they are guided to content or they're given a simple, clear browsing experience. So on the left, what you see here is a gallery card. Many of you are familiar with it. This is on that, invasive species example site. And there's just 3 cards, front and center, very clean, nothing else around it, kind of distracts the users. It'll take the user right to the content, which is really good to showcase, the most important things. And next in line, of course, is in the middle where there is a search and there are category cards. And really good at saying, I've got a couple of different topics in mind, ideally 2 or 3 words. They're quickly, linked to the tag, category, or group that you've already pre-filtered to, and the users don't have to browse through the entire giant search catalog. But of course, putting a giant search bar up front is a very intuitive way to get people directly in the content and exploring on right there. But presenting this content really depends on what you want your users to do and how often they go to it and the number of items that you have in it. So if you have very few and just want to showcase things, use a category card or embed an app or a map card directly onto your site. But if you have dozens or even hundreds of items, we recommend putting your category cards, search cards front and center so users can get to that data and start exploring more. And for Vermont, you could use a combination of these different items that, options that I recommended here. If you have specific initiators of interest, you could put gallery cards. You could break it down by category as well so that, people are taken to the data of interest. We also have an improved search view right now, and you can view the content in the gallery form, not just as a list. You can filter by nested organization categories. There is also a location facet as well for filtering by the data, the extent of the items as well here. And when you're browsing through the items, you're not necessarily just going through all of your layers. We no longer do that exploding of the layers. So we provide just one layer for the item. There's additional enhancements that are coming up in the future. Interoperability. So this is an area that sometimes people have no idea that exists within Hub. Taking your content and using it externally. Hub has what it's called Hub feeds. If you are on the search page, you'll see that there is a little action on the left side that you can click on the little RSS icon. It'll open up a modal data access to our GeoRSS. And there are 2 different forms. And most recently, we added the ODC API, records confirming search API. And you can do configurations on the feed itself so that you can have exact literal values for your metadata. You can have fallbacks. This is new as well. This was actually released last year, but we've been getting feedback on this utility as well. It is our search API. It conforms right now to the OGC API records draft specification, and it has a lot of different purposes. So the next part of the best practices is going into configuring downloads. So some of the best practices are really oriented around configurations of servers that you manage or how you plan to have the updates to your content. There is a QR code here that link you out to one of the pages if you want to quickly grab the link to that through the QR code. So I'm going to talk through some server configurations, best practices, as well as a few others, just to know how our system is working. If you do have ArcGIS server and you're publishing through that workflow, we don't have a lot of visibility into the settings that you have put in place. And if you start finding that there are some issues that we need to troubleshoot, many times it's because of one or two things on your service, at least to start off. And we do recommend whenever possible, you limit the number of records that you have, the number of columns that you have, and the geometry complexity for any one layer. It's very appealing to have, one giant layer with millions of records and very complex geometry. But we do find that when data is on ArcGIS server, the performance is very dependent on the underlying hardware that you have. And you'll find end users saying, hey, my downloads seem to be taking too much time. What's happening? And sometimes it's because, you have such a large layer that it takes a lot of time to possibly download. We also find that sometimes customers will put in spatial references that don't actually use numeric numbers. Sometimes you'll have, values in there that are characters or spaces or other things like that that can cause a problem. And when you're actually running download jobs, check just to make sure that you're using a spatial reference that is readable by the system. And the last is really, once again, go back to your ArcGIS Online Hub to the help page to look for, more performance tips. Two of the biggest things that we know about troubleshooting are because, certain things are not turned on. We've asked, the enterprise team to turn these on by default, but, that's not yet happened. And these settings, allow Hub to communicate with the server to make downloads available. And sometimes you might also see that, caching takes time because the way Hub currently works is when a download is requested for the first time, it caches the data, and the second time around, it becomes much faster. The last thing in this section is the new download experience. You can enable it on any item by item basis, and we're starting with the hosted feature services to begin with. We recommend that if you have any of these turned on, then your download capability is going to be much faster. We are currently in the development phase of this, and you will definitely see more features coming on. So definitely turn on the hosted download capability for a better experience. And the last section of my presentation is on Hub administration. Want to just go into some tips and tricks for administering Hub community members. If you get Hub Premium in the future, there are some really neat things you can do to manage your Hub community members. Our general sense is that it's best to do that at the site level to begin with, because in part this provides context about how they've entered your organization and how they're interested in. If someone goes to a site, you'll be able to see the users who have chosen to follow that specific initiative, whether they are users from your employee organization or your community organization or an entirely different ArcGIS Online organization as well. And if you do allow people to follow your initiative, we recommend that you keep them in the loop. They follow to get updates. So give them updates on a periodic basis. You can send them emails directly from the Hub page to provide updates on what's going on. And this can be helpful to ensure that the users have, signed up for a named user account, and it can be identified when entering submissions on surveys that you put out on your initiatives. And if you'd like to manage all of your community members at once, it's best done by signing into your community organization's ArcGIS Online portal. And when you do that, be sure to log in as a community admin account. And this brings me to my last slide. And as a key point, I talked about doing some of the power user things in ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Hub or Pro, but for a lot of things, it can be done in ArcGIS Hub itself. And if it can be done in ArcGIS Hub, please do it in ArcGIS Hub and not in ArcGIS Online. There are often several items or groups that we are updating simultaneously. It's easiest to keep them in sync using that hub interface. This includes things like renaming and deleting sites and pages, or adding users to groups. And one additional note to be mindful of is the 512 group limit for every user. Every user in ArcGIS Online can only be a member of 512 groups. We don't see this often, but sometimes we do come across admins who have created a bunch of groups for other users. And if you're unable to join a group, it's because you're already part of 512 groups. And finally, if you're working at a pretty large scale, like making the same changes to hundreds of pages, or you want to do something that's complex, like cloning a site layout from Enterprise over to Hub, or transferring a site and its pages and its groups to another user while maintaining sharing capabilities, we have a Python library called HubPy that can help. And that QR code will take you to a direct link where you can access, the Jupyter notebooks as examples for doing the things that I mentioned. And that's the end of my presentation. I want to pause here and see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Krithica. Much appreciated. Lots of content here, and some of it seems pretty well squarely centered on what we at VCGI, in particular, on behalf of all of our EGC partner organizations, set up with the Geodata portal. But there was certainly a lot there also that are more perhaps program or project specific that some of our participants on the call might be interested in. So any folks have questions for Krithica, clarifying ideas you'd like to cover, or even high-level stuff that you want to talk about with the Hub product? Feel free to either raise your hand or type in the chat box for questions. Melanie, you have your hand up.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the presentation. Super helpful. CCRPC is actually working with a consultant to build a hub site for our regional plan. So this was a really helpful presentation. Just wondering I guess, is it possible to switch if you start building your hub site using Hub Basic? Can you switch to Hub Premium if you have that subscription? I think we're building it in Basic, but I like some of the sharing and user and privilege capabilities that you highlighted that seem to not be available in Basic.
Yes, so when Hub Premium is turned on, you don't have to clone your site. Those Hub Premium capabilities will be directly added to your Hub Basic site, so you don't have to really recreate it. So once you procure Hub Premium, they automatically get added, and you'll have, the capabilities of Hub Premium in it. Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, that makes sense. Just a follow-up question. What happens if the site is built with like one AGOL username, but a different AGOL username has access to Premium? Is there any way to transfer it over?
Yes, so definitely transferring is possible. And like I mentioned, if you want to do that complex, transferring of content, a lot of pages, then you can use the Hub Pi. But if not, just transferring content to another user within the same organization is not difficult. But if you want to transfer between organizations, then it becomes, difficult because, the URL changes, the item ID changes and things like that, if that makes sense. So are your users within the same AGOL, or are they in different AGOLs?
They're different because we're using our
Oh.
CCRPC AGOL versus the VAPTA AGOL. That's premium. So just something that I need to explore a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Okay. It's definitely much harder to transfer ownership between organizations, not so much within the same organization.
Okay, thank you.
Carolyn?
Hi. So if I'm understanding correctly, I will need the premium in order to share with the public and folks that don't have an ArcGIS license.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool. It's so much information, a lot to process. So thank you for the presentation. But yeah, that was my one question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments, questions from the group? I think hearing none, Krithica, we will likely follow up with you. There's some specifics regarding data governance practices, best practices in particular, that are probably necessary to leverage all of the functionality that you've outlined today. And our business meeting follows this presentation in a few minutes here, which will be beginning to start that conversation a bit about how to go about best practices for managing decentralized data publishing, which is much the case in the state of Vermont. So we'll probably be following up with you fairly shortly about best practices and data governance as we begin our scoping for the next version of at least our open data sites. And then we'll keep an ear to the ground of our users about how some of their more program specific uses of the Hub product suite might fit their cases. So thanks again, much appreciated.
Thank you for having.
And just lastly, do you, given that you're the Northeast advisor on behalf of ESRI, is it cool if folks follow up with you with further questions as they arise?
Absolutely. I'm going to put in my email in the chat. So, feel free to email me. Yeah, I'm happy to, get in a conversation, chat, whatever.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks you as
Mhm.
well for joining us today, all the participants, and we'll see you next time for one of EGC's Geo Enlightenment sessions. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.